They would need this to survive the coming 7 months of an otherwise foodless winter. So it's really, really hard to kind of find food during the winter. So that's why these birds kind of prepare during the spring and the summer to make as many caches as they can. Snowy does have to be nifty though. Hello everyone. Good morning. I hope you're doing well today, and I hope your day is going great. If not, that is totally fine. Welcome to the Early Bird Weekly Podcast, where we talk about birds. I am Ratiksha Satish Kumar, and in today's episode, we are going to be talking about the Canada jay. We will look into some interesting facts about the Canada jay and sometimes go off track with what's happening outside my window. I usually film early in the morning, so you'll hear a lot of birds in the background, which is kind of perfect for this podcast. I find that birdsong is absolutely just refreshing to hear this early in the morning. But now let's shift our focus to the star of today's episode, the Canada jay. The Canada jay is known by several names such as the whiskey jack, camp robber, meat bird, meat hawk, moose bird, gray jay. You might wonder why they have random names like camp robber and whiskey jack, but their names are actually really fitting for their character. As we learn about these jays, you'll start to notice that they have a unique personality of their own. We'll look into each of their names at the end of the episode. So, before we go into the episode, let's do some breathing exercises to help us relax and focus. So if you're ready, breathe in and breathe out. Breathe in and breathe out. Last time here. Breathe in and breathe out. Thank you so much for doing that with me. Now I want you to close your eyes and imagine a cold Canadian boreal forest. Your thick leather boots sink into the soft snow, and the sight before you is mesmerizing. A landscape filled with snow-sprinkled pine and spruce trees. Breathtaking snow-capped mountains line the background. As you admire the picturesque view, your eyes spot something fluffy on one of these spruce tree branches. As you inch your way closer quietly, trying not to scare it, you also spot tiny bead-like eyes, tiny beak on a gray ball of fluff. Soon you realize that it's a bird. Not just any bird, but a Canada jay. Lucky you! You have just met the most famous personality in the entire Canadian province. These tiny birds that literally look like a ball of fluff on a tree are only found in Canada and in some other northern states, unlike blue jays that are widespread in America. Canada jays love mixed and conifer forests. Their habitats include black spruce, white spruce, Engelmann spruce, jack pine, or lodgepole pine. These jays are not likely to be seen in your backyard unless your backyard is a cottage or a cabin in the woods. They are strictly boreal birds that stick to the boreal regions, from the tree limit in the far north through the foothills and mountains. So these birds really love their trees, really love their forests. They don't get out of there. They can also be found in campsites and picnics. So if you decide to camp out in Canada, you'll be sure to see these little visitors. They love people, especially campers, skiers, and hikers, and they'll be sure to pay you a visit in hopes of getting some food. So I would suggest carrying an extra lunch as well if you decide to go on a hike in the Canadian mountains. They measure less than 25 to 30 centimeters, and they weigh up to 60 to 80 grams. These long-tailed jays are a little smaller than the blue jay. So the blue jay is a little bigger than the Canada jay, but definitely they're not found in the same area at all. So in this episode, we'll be learning about Snowy, the Canada jay. She's the one you spotted on the tree. Her head has a striking pattern of gray and white. Medium gray back feathers line her back, and she has a lighter, fluffy gray underside. But she doesn't have a crest like a crane or a pigeon. She is more the effortlessly pretty type. She doesn't need fancy feathers to look cute. Her plumage is thick, and of course fluffy. This doesn't only make her look cute, but it protects them from freezing cold in the frigid Canadian winters. Her long tail is also medium gray with lighter tips. Her legs and feet are black, and finally, just to add to her cuteness, she has a tiny black beak. The reason her beak appears short is because she has some hair covering her nostrils. Her stubby black bill, large dark eyes, and thick fluffy plumage gives her a soft, rounded appearance, which makes her charming and pleasant-looking. Canada jays' coloring differs according to the region they're present in, especially the amount of dark gray on the back of their head. The darkest birds are in Newfoundland and northeastern Canada. Canada jays in the Rocky Mountains are paler overall. Birds in the Rockies from southeastern British Columbia to Arizona and New Mexico have the least amount of black on their head due to the dark color of their head not extending to their eyes. Birds in south of Canada, in the Cascades, the mountain range in North America, and coast ranges are browner. Snowy is not only cute, but she's also very smart. Boreal regions, also known as taiga, are the world's largest terrestrial biomes, so they form a circumpolar belt across the northern high latitudes, primarily between 50° north and 65° north latitude. This biome is characterized by cold climates with long, harsh winters and short growing seasons. So there's not a lot of food there, but these birds, they don't really eat a lot of seeds or anything. Let's go into their diet later. So this biome is characterized by cold climates with long, harsh winters and short growing seasons, where freezing temperatures can persist for 6 to 8 months. So to live in these freezing forests, she has to really tough it out. Gray jays are social and often seen in small family groups that consist of 2 to 4 birds. They are active during the day, spending time flying around their territory, hopping or walking on the ground in search of prey, caching or hiding food, perching, and sunbathing. Unlike other passerine birds, Snowy nests in the winter. Weird, right? But she actually has a pretty good reason for doing this. Canada jays begin nest building around the later part of February. They may even nest during the later part of March. During this time, the temperature in Canada is between -4°C and 8°C. That is 25°F to 47°F. And nighttime lows often drop below -10°C, that is 14°F. So Canada jays are really tough birds, and male Canada jays are the ones who choose the nest site, which is typically at a dense conifer close to the trunk at the base of the branch. So they really look for really perfect place to kind of build a nest. It's often pretty low. The nests are often built pretty low, only about 15 feet above the ground. Male and female build a nest, but at the beginning, The male does most of the work. The nest needs to be well insulated, so hundreds of cocoons fill the gaps of the dry dead twigs. These birds will also use caterpillar webs to line their nests. Lichen and strips of bark are closer to the center. So these birds really use anything that they can find in the boreal forest. And I find it interesting that they find cocoons and caterpillar webs. The cup is lined with hair, fur, or feathers. The birds press their bodies down inside to mold it into shape. I find this really cool. Like some birds, they don't really do this, but the Canada jays kind of press their bodies and use it as this kind of molding thing to kind of soften out the nest and make it rounder. So they place the nest in the south side of the tree, which allows the female and the nest to receive direct sunlight. No other passerine, you can see that how smart they are about like receiving all the sunlight that they can get in the very cold Canadian forest. No other passerine in Canada nests as early as the Canada jay. By January, the bird is already busy spotting a place to build a nest. So most birds kind of nest during the spring season because the weather's really not that harsh during that time. But these birds, they do have a very good reason for kind of nesting in cold, nesting during the winter. Our little Snowy here is about 2 years old, so she already has a partner, Bill. Gray jays are not sexually dimorphic, but males are slightly larger than females. Dimorphism means male and female birds of the same species exhibit different characteristics. Some birds possess this characteristic, but there are other types of dimorphisms as well. Now let's get back into Snowy's life. Snowy starts laying her eggs during late February. A clutch consists of 2 to 5 light green-gray eggs with darker spots. Canada jay mothers sometimes nest on stormy days as cold as -20 degrees Celsius. Nesting during snowstorms is a testament to just how tough these birds are. Canada jays are not only smart and very tough, but they're also quite prepared. Snowy's reason to nest this early is so she and Bill will have time to prepare for the following winter. And Snowy has an interesting way of storing food. She covers any food she wants to store with her sticky saliva by working the food back and forth in her mouth. Canada jays have enlarged salivary glands. I would think that they have these salivary glands only specifically to do this job of kind of coating the food with her sticky saliva. Then she sticks it under a lichen or a piece of bark or anywhere else on a tree she can stuff it into. Snowy can make up to 1,000 caches a day. Whoa, these birds really are hardworking. By winter, she and Bill would have a lot of food stores. They would need this to survive the coming 7 months of an otherwise foodless winter. So it's really hard to kind of find food during the winter. So that's why these birds kind of prepare during the spring and the summer to make as many caches as they can. Snowy does have to be nifty though. Other animals might steal her stored food, so to help conceal them, she covers her stored food with a piece of bark or lichen. And she spreads the food stores evenly throughout her territory to prevent huge losses. So that's really smart because, for example, if another Canada jay kind of finds one of the seeds that she has hidden, if she keeps all of her seeds there, then it's going to take all of her seeds. But if she spreads it out throughout the territory, the Canada jay, like the outside Canada jay, will only find 1 or 2 of those seeds. So Snowy is really smart there. But the most fascinating part is that she actually remembers where she hid all of her food. I wish I had that kind of memory. I would ace all of my classes. Anyways, This is one main reason why Canada jays can survive winter without migrating. So when feeding, gray jays wrench, twist, and tug food apart, unlike other jays, such as the blue jay, which grasp and hammer their food. Snowy, for example, isn't very picky. However, she doesn't eat the seeds found throughout their entire coniferous range. Weird, right? Instead, she eats berries, insects, mushrooms, and spiders. She also eats eggs and nestlings of other birds, and even small animals such as mice or shrews. So, her way of finding food as a family or pair is to move slowly through the forest, stopping frequently on mid-level perches to scan the forest floor and surrounding trees. Not much is missed by her sharp eyes. In fact, she can even spot anything that has died recently within a few hours. It's not uncommon to see her picking at a carcass. She's ready to take advantage of any sudden opportunity that comes her way. So Snowy really knows how to survive a Canadian winter, unlike me who's never been to Canada. However, if you're from Canada, guys, I really respect you for living out, for surviving your Canadian winters. Snowy will also snap up flying insects just like a flycatcher, or pounce on a mouse or shrew that dares to venture out in the open. So unlucky mice or shrew that just decided to go out of their burrow for once will be caught by our Canada jay. Canada jays cough up or cast a pellet. This is the massive parts of undigested food that some birds occasionally regurgitate. For Canada jays, a pellet can measure up to 13 to 33 millimeter. Not centimeter, millimeter. They're really, really tiny. So this is actually useful for scientists as they can use this to identify what they ate. Interestingly, Snowy and Bill will not attempt a brood in May or June. It's odd because they clearly have a lot of time to raise another brood as they nest way earlier than other birds. But since they have to find food and save up for the winter, they prefer to spend their summers storing as much food as they possibly can to survive the winter. So that's really smart of them there. Like instead of kind of having a lot of nestlings and having to take care of them, they take care of the nestlings early in the winter and then they use the rest of spring and summer to kind of prepare for the next winter. That's very smart. So all that food that Snowy and Bill hoarded during the summer and fall not only helps to sustain themselves during the winter, but they also feed this to their nestlings while there is still much snow around. And nesting this early also gives the nestlings a chance to learn how to forage and store food for their first winter. Having babies raised and out of the nest by April also gives the pair time to prepare for the next winter. I want you to close your eyes again and imagine. You return to the tree as tiny chirps reach your ears through the snowy landscape. Snowy and Bill now have 3 nestlings to raise. You keep returning to the tree from time to time. But as time passes, you realize the nestlings look nothing like Snowy or Bill. No fluffy white feathers, no dark gray nape, or light gray underside. Now you're really confused. But here's the thing. Juvenile Canada jays look quite different from their parents, like an entirely different species. In fact, the great pioneering naturalist Jean-Jacques Audubon thought it was an entirely different species when he first encountered them back in the 1830s. So young jays are a sooty black color with a pale bill that turns darker as it grows out of adolescent stage. But once the juveniles have completed their first molt in July and August, they look much more like their parents. So once they're molted, they kind of grow their new feathers and they look much more like Snowy and Bill. The 3 nestlings seem to get along with each other, but soon you start to sense something odd going on. Canada jay siblings start cuddly and sweet, but that changes after 65 to 75 days. They often fight until they expel their nest members from their former nesting territory. So this means that the dominant juvenile will accompany its parents through the summer, fall, and winter of its first year. So only one juvenile will accompany its parents because the expelled birds, the majority of which are females, quickly leave, and a few may succeed in attaching themselves to unrelated pairs, mainly those that have failed in their own nesting that year. So I find this really interesting because I've never seen any other bird kind of chase away its own siblings, but Canada jays, I don't think they like their brothers and sisters anyways. But most juveniles aren't even lucky to survive their first autumn. That just took a dark turn right there because you see, juveniles, they get trained by their parents, and when they're expelled, they have like no training to survive this really tricky landscape. And that explains why they kind of die. They starve or they die in a snowstorm. It's just sad. Only 50% of the dominant juveniles get to stay with their parents and benefit from their example and protection. That was not a very great thing to learn about. Let's be honest, it was kind of sad, but that's just how birds are. At least that's how Canada jays are. They might have a really good reason for why they do this. Gray jays are monogamous. That means pairs remain together for life unless one of the partner dies. So breeding takes place during March and April. Gray jays exhibit cooperative breeding, and during the nest building period, pairs are accompanied by one or two juvenile birds. So the juvenile birds from the last season will kind of help the parents build their nest as well. The role of juveniles is in allofeeding. That means food sharing by relieving caches and bringing food to younger siblings. But now this is getting even more interesting because those same juveniles expelled their own siblings, but then now they're feeding their younger siblings. Anyways, however, this is only allowed by parents during the post-fledgling period. That means after the nestlings have kind of fledged or started growing feathers, that's when these juveniles are allowed to allofeed them. Until then, parents will drive the other birds away from the nest. Gray jays become reproductively mature at 2 years of age. The oldest recorded Canada jay lived to be at least 17 years and 2 months old, which means it could have potentially raised up to 17 or more broods over its lifetime, assuming it bred successfully each year. So these Canada jays, unlike other birds, breed only once a year. Canada jays are resident birds of the Canadian boreal forest and a few northern. Due to the fact that most of these jays stay at home, not having to endure the arduous flight south, so these birds don't migrate. They can live really long lives because of this. Sure, they may have to tough out what the harsh Canadian winter has to offer, but these are Canada jays, hardy and smart birds. A Canadian winter is nothing to them. Remarkably, these guys have an average lifespan of 8 years, with many territory-owning individuals reaching 15 or 16 years. They often live a very long time for such a small bird. Our Snowy here still has a long way to go. She's only 2 years old. Anyways. Communication. So how these birds communicate was really interesting when I learned about this. To communicate with each other, gray jays use a whistled coo and various clicks and chuckles. That was a horrible impression of a Canada jay, forgive me. When predators are spotted, the birds produce a series of harsh clicks to signal a threat on the ground, or a series of repeated whistles to indicate a predator in the air. So they do have alarm calls just like many other birds. If you watch the chickadee episode, they are one of the most alarm calling birds, I think, or something like that, but you should definitely check it out. Anyways, Canada jays are one of the longest held bird study in the world. Since the 1960s, researchers in Algonquin Provincial Park in Ontario, Canada, have been monitoring Canada jays. It's the longest-running bird study in the world. Continuing a 55-year-old tradition, a dedicated team of researchers monitor breeding pairs as they build nests and raise their young. The group is made up of volunteers and graduate students. The late Russell J. Rutter, a well-known Ontario naturalist, was the one who started this study. He was interested in the jays and wanted to learn more about them. Not much was known about these birds at that time, but that was about to change. He used a technique called color banding to identify individual jays. Every jay was given a band of colored plastic and standard aluminum bands and released. From then on, a jay could be recognized as an individual and given a name according to its band combination. Russell was the first to determine that these birds lived on permanent territories and that they lived for a very long time. And they tended to nest in the same general area year after year. Later, the Algonquin Canada Jay study was taken over by Dan Strickland. Since the 1980s, Dan and volunteer helpers have been finding nests each year, banding the young, and following successful adults as well as birds. Since Dan's retirement in 2000, he has been able to devote even more time to the study. Now one of the longest running studies of any marked population of vertebrates anywhere in the world. In partnership with Dr. Ryan Norris of the University of Guelph, the study of Canada jays in Algonquin has led to new and valuable insights into their ecology and behavior. Pretty awesome stuff there. So now let's move on to some fun facts or questions that I'm going to answer about Canada jays. So number 1, how do Canada jays sunbathe? Because I think I mentioned in one of the paragraphs that I read that Canada jays sunbathe, so I was kind of curious as to how they do that. It turns out that Canada jays often sunbathe on wind-protected perches where they position themselves to take advantage of sunlight, particularly in colder regions. So just like they position their nests, they also position themselves to take advantage of the sun. They typically choose perches close to the trunk of conifer trees, which may also provide shelter from the wind while they bask. These birds really know how to sunbathe. The gray jay is often mistaken for a large chickadee, as they both look very similar. But they belong to totally different families. The chickadee belongs to the Parroty family, which is composed of small gregarious songbirds such as tits, chickadees, and titmice, and often referred to as tits in English-speaking countries outside of North America. Canada jays, however, are members of the Corvidae family. This family includes other jays, crows, magpies, and ravens, to name a few. It's a highly intelligent group of birds known for adaptability to the presence of humans in their environment. So all these other birds also love humans. I don't know if it's for the food reason or if it's just because they like humans. Anyways, they are quite boisterous, persistent, and full of personality. Canada jays, as well as others, apparently have the same brain-to-body ratio as dolphins and chimpanzees. That was one of the most surprising facts that I came upon. I don't know how you relate a bird to a chimpanzee and dolphin, but turns out you can. In 2016, an online poll and expert panel conducted by Canadian Geographic magazine selected the Canada jay as the national bird of Canada, although the designation is not formal. It should be formal. No wonder why these Canada jays are the national bird of Canada, because they're literally everywhere. They're like asking for it. Make me the national bird. Anyways, Canada jays are territorial. They exhibit strong territorialism, maintaining permanent territories year-round in coniferous forests, with territory sizes ranging from 26 to 130 hectares. approximately 36 to 180 soccer fields. These territories are defended by monogamous breeding pairs, which stay together for life and are often accompanied by a third juvenile from the previous season. The birds are highly loyal to their nesting grounds, frequently returning to the same sites season after season. When a breeding bird dies, its territory is quickly replaced by a non-breeding bird from the local population. So this ensures the continuity of the territorial unit. I really can't pronounce that word, guys. Territorial. This territorial behavior is linked to their survival strategy, as they rely on cached food stored throughout their territory to survive the winter. The presence of competitors such as Steller's jays or Canada jays from adjacent territories can inhibit caching behavior, prompting them to use more distant or concealed locations to protect their food stores. On Vancouver Island, Pacific Canada jays form larger territorial flocks of up to 10 or more individuals, where a social hierarchy dictates access to food resources, suggesting a complex social structure within their territorial system. So these birds really take their territory really seriously, and they don't let any other birds inside, so they're really territorial. So let's get into the etymology of the birds. That is the study of kind of the name or the origin of the name of the bird or the animal. So the Canada jay is a passerine bird belonging to the Corvidae family, one of the 3 members of the genus Parasaurus, which is more closely related to the magpie genus Cyanopica than to other birds commonly referred to as jays. So basically what this means is that the Canada jay is more related to the magpie genus Cyanopica than the jay genus Parasaurus. The genus Parasaurus consists of 3 species of jay, namely the gray jay Parasaurus canadensis, the Siberian jay Parasaurus infaustus, and the Sichuan jay Parasaurus internigrans. So a small note here, a passerine bird is any bird belonging to the order Passeriformes, which is the largest order of birds, comprising more than half of all known bird species and representing approximately 60% of all birds. They are commonly known as perching birds due to their specialized feet, which have an anisodactyl arrangement with 3 toes pointing forward and 1 toe pointing backward, facilitating a strong grip on branches. This order includes a vast diversity of birds such as larks, swallows, jays, crows, wrens, thrushes, cardinals, finches, sparrows, and blackbirds. So it's not a surprise that many birds come under this passerine category because it does have 60% of all the birds in the world. Passerines are primarily small to medium-sized, often brightly colored, and are mostly insectivorous or omnivorous, feeding on insects, fruits, and seeds, just like our Canada jay here. The term passerine is derived from the Latin word passer, meaning sparrow, reflecting the order's historical association with sparrows. So I think sparrows were the first passerine birds or something. The scientific name Parasaurus canadensis was assigned. It was first catalogued by naturalists in Canada. The name directly references Canada with canadensis, meaning from Canada. So the word canadensis means from Canada, and that's why they kind of put it in the end of the Parasaurus name to describe our little Snowy here. But I like calling her Snowy because it's just easy and that's cuter. Second Parasaurus species, the Siberian jay, or Parasaurus infaustus, is a small jay with a widespread distribution within the coniferous forests in North Eurasia. The specific epithet infaustus is Latin and means unlucky or unfortunate. As Siberian jays were formerly considered a bad omen. So that's not really a good thing, but I don't really see why they're a bad omen. I kind of read about them. They're perfectly fine birds that are just minding their own business, but sometimes humans make up stuff about animals that are not real, so that's how they got their name there. Anyways, we have the last jay species here, the Sichuan jay, or Parasaurus internigrans. It is actually endemic to China, and it is classified as near threatened by the IUCN due to habitat loss and fragmentation, primarily from logging and human activity. But this species is rarely studied, so there's not a lot of information about this bird. I'm gonna open the window. It's really windy out there, and it's pretty cold actually. It's not that cold, but it's kind of cold. I've been recording for like an hour. It's like 6 a.m. over here. But anyways, we're almost done. So I really hope that you're enjoying this episode, guys. For a long time, since the late 1950s, these sweet-faced birds were known as gray jays, a name that has been adopted as the official name of this bird since 1957, with the publication of American Ornithologists Union's fifth checklist. As of 2018, the name has been changed to what it is initially known as from 1831 to 1957, Canada jay. So the name Canada jay was only recently changed. It's much more fitting as the Canada jay is endemic to Canada and a few northern states. They also don't migrate, so they really are jays of Canada. As for the other names, camp robber comes from the fact that Canada jays are not shy about robbing campsites, stealing whatever food is left unattended. Meat bird or meat hawk comes from how these jays often eat carrion. They'll also kill small animals such as shrews, or even small birds such as chickadees or warblers, kind of like hawks. Moose bird came from their behavior of perching on moose to feed on engorged ticks. In the Algonquin language, the Canada jay is known as Wessakashak or Wisakadjak. I'm sure I butchered that name, but anyways, this is a name derived from a benevolent trickster and cultural hero in Algonquin mythology. And for anyone who knows Canada jays, this name is all too fitting for them. This name is actually older than the Canada jay name, dating back to 1777. All too soon, your bird study comes to an end. As you glance at Snowy for the last time, you realize you've not only been studying Snowy, but had developed a rare connection with her. It's almost impossible for you to part with her now. But you know Snowy is a tough girl. If she can raise nestlings during a snowstorm, she well knows how to carve her own path, not only for surviving, but thriving in the wooded Canadian landscape. When everyone else saw a ball of feathers on a pine tree branch, you saw a thriving young bird with a beautiful little life of its own. And that brings us to the end of this early bird episode. I hope you enjoyed learning about the Canada jay. Tune into my episode next week when we will be chatting about another cool bird. And don't forget to follow this podcast on social media. If you would like to message me on Instagram, the username is early_bird_weekly_podcast. Or if you'd like to send me an email, you can send it to earlybirdweeklypodcast@gmail.com. Feel free to ask any questions or give feedback. I'm open to any suggestions for future episodes as well. If you liked this episode, you can share this to your family and friends. That is always really, really helpful. Or feel free to leave a review on Apple Podcasts or a rating on Spotify. Thanks again for listening. See you in the next episode. Bye! That is how really dark it is here without my light.